Ever since the first music lessons were given, music teachers have badgered their students over scale memorization. But I don't think we talk about why they're important. If you listen closely, every song is based on at least one scale. Out of that scale, you can produce chords. Chords played in succession make up a chord progression. Play a few chord progressions, and then you've got a song. In the previous episode of Tools for Musicians, we explored the musical alphabet and how to move around these notes with different interval sizes to get different sounds. Now we'll talk about the groundwork that those intervals are bound to for each key. Scales. There are all sorts of scales, and they all have formulas so you can play them in each key. Some scales have less than others, but they are still played within an octave. The scales that span 7 notes before they get back to the octave include the major and minor scales. Actually, there are at least 3 forms of minor scales, but we'll get to that in a few moments. There are 6 note scales, like the whole tone scale. Just like the name infers, the scale involves only whole steps. The pentatonic scale is an ancient scale based on just 5 notes before you get back to the note you started on, just an octave higher. There are other scales like the blues and boogie that have different intervals depending on the context of scale that you're playing in. Scales are very organized, and there is a specific sequence of notes for each one. We even assign a special name and number for each note in the scale. That will help us later on in finding chord progressions and playing in different keys. Playing in different keys is called transposition. Most scales are derived from the major scale, so that's usually where everyone starts, and that's where we'll start too. For diatonic scales, we have 7 scale degrees between the 2 octave notes. Because there are no sharps and flats to confuse us, we'll use the C major scale. The first note on the C major scale is C. In any scale, we call the first note of that scale the tonic. I'm going to say that again. In any scale, we call the first note of that scale the tonic. The second scale degree in the C major scale here, it would be D. We call that the supertonic. Super meaning above or high, so supertonic means above the tonic, one note specifically. The mediant is the third scale degree, and it would be E for C major. It's the mediant because it's a third away from the tonic. In fact, there's another note that is a third away from the tonic, but we haven't gotten there yet. The fourth note of the scale is called the subdominant, F, and the fifth note, G, is called the dominant. The fourth and fifth notes of the major scale are super important in music because they move easily between each other and the tonic. Most chords move from the fourth tone to the fifth tone and back to the tonic. The sixth note, A, is called the submediant because it is a third below the next tonic. The next to last note in a scale is the seventh tone, and we call that the leading tone. Because the leading tone is a half step away from the tonic, it leads or resolves nicely into the tonic. The major scale has a bright or happy sound. The formula of intervals that makes up every major scale, when applied to the C major scale, goes from C to the next note D with a whole step, then another whole step up to E, but then a half step from E to F, followed by 3 more whole steps, G, A, B, and finally a half step up to C. That formula can be used to play the major scale in all 12 keys because there are 12 tones in an octave. Each scale requires more or less sharps or flats depending on where you start in the alphabet. Believe it or not, there is an order to sharps and flats, and there is a Tools to Musicians video on sharps and flats to learn more about key signatures. Let's look at what this scale looks like in musical notation. If you remember the intervals video, you'll remember talking about skipping and stepping notes. Notice that each note in the scale travels up from a line to a space to a line to a space. These are stepping notes. For further context on major scales, let's go crazy and try the C sharp major scale. If we start at C sharp and travel up a whole step, we reach D sharp. A whole step up from D sharp is F, followed by a half step up to F sharp. 3 whole steps forward brings G sharp, A sharp, and C, and the scale ends with the half step up from C to C sharp. So this means when you're playing in the key of C sharp, you're playing 5 sharps, and those 5 sharps are, in order, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp. To continue our analysis of scale degrees, what is the tonic of the C sharp major scale? Remember, the tonic is the first note, so it's C sharp. What is the dominant tone of the C sharp major scale? Well, dominant is the 5th, so C sharp 1, D sharp 2, F 3, F sharp 4, G sharp 5. G sharp is the fifth note, and it's the dominant. So let's discuss the minor scales. Most people recognize three minor scales: the natural minor, the harmonic minor, and the melodic minor. The really neat thing about all the minor scales is that the first five notes of each minor scale follow the same formula. So the C natural minor, the C harmonic minor, and the C melodic minor scales all have the first five notes, and they're the same. It's really the next two notes that change, which cause the difference in the scales. So the minor scale formula starts at the tonic and moves up a whole step, then a half step, followed by two whole steps. If you compare this formula to the major scale, the half steps have moved down one position and have swapped places with the whole steps. When we do this, we are adding three flats to the scale. This is an easy way to make any major scale into a minor scale. Just lower the key signature by three flats. For instance, for C minor, we add three flats. Because in the order of flats, we add B flat, E flat, and A flat. When we substitute these flatted notes for the natural notes, we get a darker and more unhappy sound. This works with key signatures with sharps also. In the key of G major, we have F sharp. To change that to G minor, we first remove the F sharp because one flat will cancel that sharp out. And then we're left with two more flats. What are the first two flats of the order of flats? B flat and E flat. So the key of G minor has two flats, B flat and E flat. The same thing happens with changing minor scales to major, except we're adding three sharps. A minor, which has zero flats and zero sharps, can be changed into A major if you add F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. So here's the simplified C natural minor scale without the other notes of the alphabet. Sometimes you might not hear natural, harmonic, or melodic, and if they're just saying C minor scale, generally it's going to be the natural minor scale. If you notice the median and submedian, or the third and sixth tones, they are now both flattened. The leading tone, or the seventh tone, has also changed, leading to a more significant change back to the tonic. Now we come to the first scale that has an interval other than a half step or a whole step. Just like other minor scales, we begin with a whole step, a half step, and then two more whole steps. Here's where it gets interesting. The next interval is a half step, followed by a minor third. The minor third is either three half steps or a whole step plus a half step. That interval is what makes this scale sound interesting, with a Middle Eastern feel to it. The final interval after the minor third is a half step up to the tonic. So we end up with these notes in the C harmonic minor scale: C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B natural, and C. Very interesting sounding scale. Guess what? It gets even more interesting with the melodic minor scale. Technically, there are two types of the melodic minor scale: the melodic minor and the classical melodic minor. Really, they're two different scales, but they share the melodic part. The regular melodic minor scale formula has normal half steps and whole steps, unlike the harmonic minor. The formula for the melodic minor scale is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step. The difference between the melodic minor and the natural minor scale is that the submedian or sixth scale degree is natural, causing that different sound. When you calculate the formula, the C melodic minor scale is C, D, E flat, F, G, A natural, B flat to C. Now, the classical melodic minor scale is kind of two scales in one. It depends on if the scale is going up, ascending, or going down, descending. The ascending classical melodic minor scale has the same 5 notes going up as the other minor scales, whole, half, whole, whole, but then the scale steps up to the tonic as a major scale, with a whole step, and half step. When the scale is descending, it is played as the natural minor scale, with a minor submediant 6th and a minor leading tone 7th. This kind of scale is used obviously in classical music, but it's also in some progressive rock and jazz music as well. The C classical melodic minor scale ascending is C, D, E flat, G, A, B, C, but descending, it reverts to C, B flat, A flat, G, F, E flat, D, C. The boogie scale is found in jazz genres like bebop and boogie woogie. There are a couple variants of this scale, but the one described here is what I've found to be the most used. One of the neat things about jazz music is the rhythm. A lot of players, including myself, prefer to swing jazz scales when you play them. In fact, the boogie scale is just the major scale with the addition of a flat submediant or 6th tone after the dominant, the 5th tone. See how important the names of notes are? We can describe aspects of the scale without using a specific key or needing to know what any of the notes are. So, the boogie scale intervals are simply whole step, half step, whole step. Here's the additional half step, plus another half step, plus the whole step and regular half step leading tone to the tonic. When we plug our C tonic into the formula, we get the following notes: C, D, E, F, G, A flat, A natural, B, C. When there are variants of this scale, I've mostly seen them as flatting the leading tone and the mediant, and it depends on the context of the tune. If you know anything about the Pentagon building in Washington, D.C., you know that it has 5 sides. The prefix pent means 5, so the pentatonic scale represents 5 notes. They are not evenly spaced, but it's an ancient scale and it's found in all music. In fact, the pentatonic scale could be played with just all the black keys on the piano. Wind chimes frequently use the pentatonic scale. No matter the combination of notes, they always sound good altogether. There are 2 pentatonic scales, the major and the minor pentatonic. First, we'll talk about the major pentatonic. The major pentatonic formula starts with 2 whole steps, jumps forward with a minor third, followed by a half step, and then a final minor third. The C major pentatonic scale includes the notes C, D, E, G, A, and then jumps to the tonic. One of the most recognizable scales in music is the pentatonic scale. Now comes one of the most recognizable scales in rock music, the minor pentatonic. Just like the major pentatonic, the minor pentatonic has 5 notes from the tonic until the next tonic, an octave higher. However, the minor third intervals have changed. The formula begins with a minor third, moves up 2 whole steps, a minor third, and leads to the tonic with a whole step. The C minor pentatonic scale includes the notes C, E flat, F, G, B flat, C. I think the really cool thing about the C minor pentatonic scale is that it's only 1 note away from our final scale, the blues scale. Because the blues scale is directly influenced by the minor pentatonic scale, it too has its place in rock music. To play the blues scale, you just need to know the minor pentatonic scale and add 1 note, the most infamous interval from the tonic you can have, the tritone. The tritone connects the 2 parts of the minor pentatonic scale. The final blues formula begins with a minor third, next a whole step, then 2 half steps so as to include the tritone, and finally it ends with a minor third and a whole step. This is the more popular version of the blues scale. I've seen it played the same way but with fewer notes, typically without the F sharp and fewer flats. I like this blues scale because it comes directly from the minor pentatonic scale and it provides the most options for interesting scales. The notes in the C blues scale are C, E flat, F, F sharp, G, B flat, C. So we've come to the end of our scale journey for now. If you consider all the scales that are within the formulas we've just discussed, there are 12 major scales, 48 minor scales, 12 boogie scales, 24 pentatonic scales, and 12 blues scales. That equals 108 scales that you can practice. Or you can learn the formulas well with the alphabet, and you can just think of the formula and go from there. Memorization and internalization is the only way to truly know a scale and utilize them effectively. I could do a whole video on just scale methods and the different exercises I used to study them. If I hadn't mentioned it before, this is not an exhaustive list of all the scales there are. There are diminished scales, augmented scales, whole tone scales, and octatonic scales, just from what I can remember off the top of my head. There are also another set of scales that we can talk later about called modes, and that's taking a scale and transposing it up a scale degree and playing it in that setting. That's a little confusing, but I'll do a detailed video like this one to make sure it makes sense. Until then, practice your scales, because in the end, you're really practicing all the notes that will be in the songs you will play in the future.